Hey there. I want to share with you a horrible truth. Literally, that's what it's called. This is from the history written by William Bradford, the first governor of the Pilgrims, after arriving in the New World. And he kept basically a history of what happened to the Pilgrims. And of course, we're all familiar with the Pilgrims, you know, the hats and the belt buckles and the turkeys and the Thanksgiving, etc. But actually reading William Bradford's books, there were two books that he wrote, reading those books about what actually it was like to come to the New World, to found the community, you know, in the face of wilderness, and with all, you know, all you know, they just imagine showing up on the Mayflower. We picture it kind of, you know, parking on the beach, you know, setting up camp and having a Thanksgiving, but it wasn't like that at all. It was crossing a terrible sea, and coming upon, they were striking for Virginia, but wound up in the New England area, and very terrible coast. Finally finding some shelter in Cape Cod, and being faced with just a wall of trees, with, you know, going back who knows how far, filled with beasts, and as they termed it, savages, that they would periodically see come out of the woods and look at them and then go back into the woods. They had no idea how many were in there. Talk about survivor man, and the ship captain that, you know, wants to get them off the boat. Get off, we've got to go back because we're leaving you. You know, no helicopter coming, no button to press. Now, consider, remember what I'm about to read is called The Horrible Truth. Consider the mental framework and purpose of the Pilgrims coming to the New World was to basically have as so many have done and to follow, and before I imagine, to find some religious freedom, to be able to worship as they see fit. Namely, this was the second part of their escape from England, first going to Holland, of course, but finding life there very difficult, and then deciding to take up a whole new world of their own in a new world. So they came over as a very devout group. They did have encounters with the sailors, etc., and there were others that were in the area to follow, and others that had been there. But largely they were on their own. But consider that small group of men and women that were to set up their own life and to have a very pure existence focused on God. Now, when I was in school and I learned about the Pilgrims, I learned a very particular view, the aforementioned hats and belt buckles and cooperating with the natives in the first Thanksgiving. I didn't get any indication or story of a horrible truth. So this is what I get for reading William Bradford's books. This is from his second book of the history, which was actually lost at the Revolution, the American Revolution, and wound up in the middle of the 19th century in the Bishop of London's house. It was discovered in his attic and then published after that. So this is what I'm about to read to you is William Bradford, who was the governor. He was the first elected governor of the Pilgrims. His account of a terrible thing that happened, a horrible truth. Here we go. This is from chapter 32 in 1642. A horrible truth. This is William Bradford writing. There was a youth whose name was Thomas Granger. He was a servant to an honest man of Duxbury, being about 16 or 17 years of age. His father and mother lived at the same time at Sictate. He was this year detected of Buggery, and indicted for the same, with a mare, a cow, 2 goats, 5 sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey. Now, if you haven't already figured out, if you didn't already know what Buggery is, you can kind of picture, right? So, of course, this would be you know, any type of an illicit type of unsanctioned, non-missionary style, I guess of the, you know, sexual activities, including bestiality, with no less a mare, a goat, a cow, 5 sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey? Continuing. Horrible it is to mention, but the truth of the history requires it. He was first discovered by one that accidentally saw his lewd practice upon the mare, towards the mare. I forbear particulars, in parentheses. Being upon it examined and committed, in the end, he not only confessed the fact with that beast at that time, but sundry times before. So he confessed to doing it. He was caught with a mare, and he confessed to doing it. Yeah, I did it that time, and I did it lots of times before, he says. It's amazing how open he is with this. I guess he's been caught. And it's several, but I wonder if he knew the consequences. And it's several times with all the rest of the aforementioned, of the forenamed in this indictment. And this his free confession was not only in private to the magistrates, though at first he strived to deny it, but to sundry, both ministers and others, and afterwards, upon his indictment, to the whole court and jury, and confirmed it at his execution. So at first he denied it, but then he confessed it, and then confessed it on and on and on, right up to the moment of his death. Execution for buggery. And whereas some of the sheep could not so well be known by his description of them, others with them were brought before him, and he declared which they were and which were not. Imagine that, right? So he's trying to describe which sheep he had sex with, right? Well, it's the speckled one. Speckled or spotted, huh? The speckled one or whatever, and he brings, well, no, I'm not bringing forth the sheep into the courtroom. Well, not that one. Yeah, that one, not that one. Now, there's consequences to the animals, too. This is significant. And he declared which they were and which were not. And accordingly, he was cast by the jury and condemned, and after executed about the 8th of September, 1642. So he was killed, but it goes on, it gets worse. As if execution for buggery or execution in any sort couldn't be worse, bad enough. So just recapitulate real quick. So this is a 16, 17-year-old boy, a servant. This may explain things, right? He came over as a servant to the family, maybe not a pilgrim himself, not so sure. Maybe, but that's later. William Bradford goes on to explain, how did this happen? How did this sin get into our small community? And he was blaming it on the world, right? He cautions the other pilgrims about what servants to allow into their community. So he does that. He has sex with all basically a barnyard orgy. I'm trying to figure out how the turkey went down, literally, and was caught, confessed, tried, and executed. But here we go. There's more. A very sad spectacle it was, for first the mare, and then the cow, and the rest of the lesser cattle were killed before his face, according to the law. So, before he was executed, I think this happened as he was hung, as he stood upon the scaffold. I think they raised him. I don't think they had a scaffold. I don't think it was that thing. They put a rope over a tree and then just pulled on, lifted up. There's a like an etching. I looked up and saw that etching of the event. What they did was they dug a pit, and then while he was standing there waiting to be killed himself, and killed all of the animals that he'd had sex with, and then put all the animals into the pit to bury, not using any of the animals' body parts, so to hammer home what he had done, and that he was not just he was to suffer, but the animals were to suffer. And as William Bradford says, this is according to the law, namely Leviticus 20:15, which indicates that whoever should have sex with a beast, that both he and the beast should be put to death. This explains both the reason that Thomas Granger is being killed and all of the animals. And he goes on and says, let me just repeat that last sentence. A very sad spectacle it was, for first the mare, and then the cow, and the rest of the lesser cattle were killed before his face, according to the law, Leviticus 20:15. And then he himself, here's Leviticus 20:15. It literally says, it's in footnotes here, and if a man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and ye shall slay the beast. And then he himself was executed. The cattle were all cast into a great and large pit that was digged of purpose for them, and no use made of any part of them. So, pretty severe consequences for the crime of buggery, as they called it. Pretty severe place, huh? Now, what's interesting also is that just down the road from the Pilgrims, there's the Marymount, up by just south of Boston there. Remember, the Pilgrims are down by Plymouth Plymouth at the bottom of Cape Cod, right? Bottom on the west side of Cape Cod. There's a nice harbor there. And then the Thomas Morton, a very educated Englishman, started his own little colony just up the road, so to speak, at what he called Marymount, basically, but he pronounced it a little bit differently, always throwing in kind of puns and jests. And it was considered a very worldly, secular community up there. They even had a maypole, drove the Pilgrims crazy, drove them nuts that they had come all the way to America to found this religious utopia. And then the secular hippies, and they do call Thomas Morton the America's first hippie. The secular hippies are 20 miles up the coast, dancing around maypoles and drinking, and they would invite the Indian women to come and party with them at night, and they would frolic, and they would and they drove, and they would actually send Miles Standish, he was the military leader of the Pilgrims, send him up there with men to try to catch him. They would catch Thomas Morton, put him on a ship and send him back to England, and he would come back. And they'd put him on a ship and send him back to England, and he'd come back again. So it's like they were so frustrated, the Pilgrims. The world just keeps coming to us with its sin, as well exemplified by the execution by hanging of a young man guilty of such a crime, such a as he called it. What did he call it? The horrible tale, the terrible thing that happened. Anyway, thanks for listening. I guess there's more depth to history than at first glance, huh?